Okay, good morning, everybody. Today we begin at the very bottom of 18b, continuing to discuss details about finding certain documents and under what circumstances they can or should be returned. Rabba Bar Chana, Irkasle Gita, Bemidrasha. Rabbi Bar Chana had lost a divorce document that he was supposed to deliver. Uh, I think not his own divorce, but he was delivering on behalf of somebody else. Um, um, so he lost it near the base medrash, and it was found by somebody else. Amar, he said, "Isimana, if you want me to give you a siman, an identifying mark on it." In order to return it to me, I have such a mark. I know of such a mark. Or if you'll return to me based on my own recognition of the document that I claim I recognize it. Easily because I have that too. I can do that. So they gave it to him. Amar, he said, Lo yadana imishum simana because simani deraisa. I don't know, why did they give it back to me? I gave them two options. What made them decide to give it back to me? Was it the siman, the identifying mark? And they hold that that's a biblical level detail of the law, or because I claim to recognize it, and that would only be because I'm, a trustworthy person. And I know the law, right? I know things. I'm a rabbi. I'm a scholar. But that wouldn't apply to a regular person. Okay. So that just wraps up what we had, some of the details we'd seen before. Kufa we saw before. Shuk, you find the divorce bill in the marketplace. Bisman Shabal Moda, when the husband says, "Yes, I had divorced my wife," Yasir give it to the woman. Ain't about Moda, but if he says, "I never divorced her," don't give it to anybody. So the Gemara says, "Bisman Shabal Moda Mia Yasir Isha." Wait, um, so so this Brisa is saying that you do give it back to the woman if the husband admits that he gave it to her. V'leichu shema kasav litem b'nisan v'nosan la'tishrei. Maybe this is a case where he had the divorce written in Nisan, but he held on to it until 6 months later or whatever, till Tishrei. Meanwhile, he's going and selling, profiting off of the peros, off of the property that she brought into the marriage, and he has the right to not to the principal, but to the peros, to the yield. But we're giving him, so in other words, he never gave the divorce till Tishrei. So in the meantime, between Nisan and Tishrei, he's entitled to do that. Now we go and give this divorce to the woman, and then it's already like a cheshvan, and this divorce turns up, and you give it back to the woman. So she's going to claim that anything that was sold between Nisan and Tishrei belongs to her, not to him. But since he didn't actually give the divorce till Tishrei, it's not true. It's like it does belong to him. So by giving the get to the woman instead of the husband, you're opening up a possibility that you're giving something, taking something that belongs to him really, and giving it to her. So Hanichal Mandiyamar Kevan Shanasanena Vulgarsha Shuvain Leval Peros. Now, Shafir, now if you say that once he's decided to divorce her, he can't profit anymore from the yield of her property. Okay, so then it's true. Then the date that appears written in the get is actually the date that he no longer had the right to sell anything. So by giving the divorce document to the woman, you're actually just affirming her actual rights. But if you say that he only gives up the right to the yield when he actually hands over the divorce, Michael Maymar, then you have a problem. So my answer is that when the woman comes to collect from the from the buyer of the yield. We wouldn't just confiscate we wouldn't take the property away, or the paros that were sold. We wouldn't just confiscate them. We say you have to prove when it was given. In other words, based on the date in the get, we wouldn't actually do anything. We would demand proof when it was given. So the fact that you give the get back to the woman with the early date on it, that has no consequences. Now, okay, so why is this different from a
But the woman wasn't
IOU?
divorced until Tishrei, though, right? Because
Right?
she didn't exactly get the get. So any property sold in that time should belong to her.
Indeed. But wait a minute. No. According to the view that, yeah, according to the view you're referring to, that it belongs to her after the date was written, then wait, I don't understand the question. Say again.
If the get didn't take effect until Tishrei, if she didn't
Right,
actually receive it, doesn't
right.
any property that she had still
Right.
belong to her, and she should get the property back? It wasn't his right to sell it, right?
Yeah, but she has to prove it, right? We're talking about a case where it's in dispute. She has to prove, if she can prove when it was, when the relevant actions took place, then we rule accordingly. But if she can't prove that it belongs to her, then we don't confiscate, we don't give it to her, right? Like any other case, you have to prove
Yeah.
it.
You have to bring
Dagmar
proof.
says, "My shtami shtarei." Why is this different than a regular IOU? It's not. We have a Mishnah, matzah shtarei. We find an IOU. If there's a lien involved, lo yachzir. Don't give it back to the lender, right? Because of the problem of what happens to the property that people bought in the meantime. The lien property. Then we already discussed that Mishnah at length, and we determined that it's when the borrower admits to the loan, right? He admits to the obligation to pay it back. And the problem was, what if he, wrote the document in Nissan and didn't hand the money over, didn't lend the money until Tishrei? The Qatari Chukucha Shalkidin. What happens to people who buy it, in Sivan? It looks like from the document that they bought lien property, but really the property wasn't under lien until after they bought the property, right? So they would lose out unjustly. So the answers, also nami lihadar. So um, so if our case in the get that we would require proof applies to the get, then lihara, then give it back. Like we should do the same as we did with the get. Like just because there's a date in the document doesn't prove anything. You have to prove when the money was handed over, right? And then the buyer would be safe unless some other proof is brought when the money was handed over. The date on the document doesn't prove anything. I'm right. So my answer is in the case of a divorce, then the I think what it's saying here is that yeah. Okay. Here it is. Then the buyer of the goods would come to Beis Din and demand the money, demand the proof that when were you divorced? Amar, because he might say, "Hi da hadruhan yale rabbanan legita." Why did the rabbis give her back her get? Not because they really believe the dates in the document, but mishum lo tagin v'tesiv, because there's another factor here, a significant factor of aguna. Right? We don't want this poor woman to, if she doesn't have her get, and it's going to be contested whether she's married or not, she won't be able to remarry. So that's an overriding concern why they gave her back the get. But, but I don't buy the fact that the dates are right. But now, that's fine for her. But now she wants my money, right? She wants the property that I bought. Let her prove it. Right? The fact that the rabbis gave her back the get doesn't prove anything about the date. Like that, and it would be expected that the guy who's going to have the property taken away from him and given to the woman could be expected to demand that proof. In the case of an IOU, the buyer is not going to demand anything. Like he would say to himself, like, oh, it looks like the rabbis decided. Why else would they give him back the document, right? Why else would they give it back to him? It must be because of the date of the loan, right? The details in the document are the overriding concern. Lemitrafu. So it's the reason they give it back to the document back to the guy is so that he can collect from me. Shmamina, Kamarabana Bemilsa. So they must be that they looked into it and they gave it back to him justifiably. It must be true that I actually owe the money, right? So which is not the case. There's no other overriding concern. So that's why we have a different ruling in that case. Okay, moving on. Shichuri Avadim. The Mishnah has said, what happens if you if you find a document of emancipation of a slave? The rabbis taught most of Shichur Bashuk. If you find one of these documents in the marketplace, if the slave owner, admits that the slave was freed Yasser Levin, so give the document to the slave. Well, yeah, ain't a Rav Mother, but if the owner contends that or denies it, well, Yasser don't give it back to anybody. So Rav Mother, all right. So you admit that when the owner admits, so give the document to the slave. But why? Same case. What if he wrote it in Nisan, didn't give it till Tishrei? Meanwhile, the slave goes ahead. He's buying property. So who owns the properties? If he was still owned by the master, by the owner, then it belongs to the owner. And then the master goes and sells these properties. Now, if we give back this emancipation document that was written in Nisan, then the slave can go and say, look, I was freed in Nisan. He sold these to you without ownership, without justification. It really belonged to me. Give it back, right? Whereas it may not be true. It may be that he didn't actually free him until Tishrei, and it was a valid sale. So how can you give it back to the slave? It's okay if you hold that it's considered a positive thing that you get freed from slavery. And then we could hold like a baye here, that once the document is signed and witnessed, the witnesses act as like they take possession, as it were, on behalf of the slave. They take possession of his own self, right? They cause the slave to acquire his own self at the time of the signing. So then fine, Shapir, then it's fine. Sure, give back the document, because sure, he never handed over the document till Tishrei, but at the time that it was signed and witnessed in Nisan, it actually took effect. So then it's true that the former slave should have the document and be able to collect on that basis any of those properties that were sold. But what if you say it's not necessarily a good thing? Nobody else can decide on your behalf to accept your freedom, because your freedom is not considered a good thing. How is your freedom not considered a good thing? So it's discussed in other places, right? That you don't get supported, right? You have to support yourself. So sure, you can decide to do that. You can be very happy about it, but we can't assume that you're going to be happy about it. Could be, we have to assume that you're not happy about it. And so it only takes effect when you yourself accept the document of emancipation. Not, it can't be done on for you on your behalf by the witnesses at the time of the signing. So Michael Mayor. So then you have the problem of the interim period again. The answers the Chiasi Lamitraf, Arinanle, Aisiraya, Amos Matza Shifriyanta. So just as we said before, it's not a problem because when the slave comes and says, hey, these were really my properties, and you have to give them back to me, we'd say, well, first prove when you were freed. And once you prove when you were freed, well, that will be the effective date that properties that you sold that were sold by somebody else actually belong to you. Okay. Moving on to the next thing in the Mishnah, Daitake Matana, if you found wills or gift documents, Tana Rabbanan, Ezu Daitake, what is a Daitake? A will, sickbed will, really. Datahe Lamekam Velios. Like the word Daitake, it can be parsed as Datahe Lamekam Velios. This should be valid and lasting. Shemes and Chasav Liflani. That if the person dies, then the property gets the bequest goes to the recipient. And matana, what's a gift? Kol shekasav bo mehayom lachar misa. That's a similar thing, but it's a matana on the deathbed, or on your sick bed. So it states that a matana would be effective today, assuming that I die from this illness. Okay. So Alma, so we see from this brisa, iksiva mehayom lachar misa hudekane. So only that the brisa appears to say that that's when it's effective. Velo, but if it doesn't say it that way, if it just says I'm giving you this gift right now, lokane, then does that mean that because the guy is sick, we don't the acquisition doesn't take place? But that doesn't make sense because the document says it take place right away, right? Rabbi says, here's what we're talking about. What is a regular gift of a healthy person? That is similar to the gift laws of somebody who's on his deathbed. That in that it doesn't take effect until after the death of the giver. If you just write a regular gift document, of course, it belongs to the recipient. But under what circumstances do we treat it like a deathbed bequest? If it's written in it from today and after I die, which we understand to mean it only takes effect from now if I end up dying from this illness. Okay. Now, Tama Delar Tnu. Now the Mishnah says don't give the will back or the gift, this gift document back, because because it doesn't say give it to the 1 second. Yeah, because the giver doesn't agree, right? He doesn't say, yes, this was a gift, go ahead and hand it over. But if he did say go ahead and give it, no sin, then he would give it. Okay, that makes sense. Minhu, but we have a question on that. Matzadaitikos, apotokos, umatanos. If you find these documents, this Bryson says, even though they both agree, lo yakser, lo lazev, even though they both agree of the validity, you don't give it back. So that appears to be contrary to our Mishnah. Amar v'yavav Mamal. Rama says, Lokasha, not a problem. Hababari, if it's a healthy person, don't give it back because you have to then if it's a regular case, don't give it back. But if it's a deathbed bequest, you do. Why? Masnisin dekatane ha'amartenu. Our Mishnah, which implies that if the giver agreed that yes, give it back to him, no snim, that's when we give it. B'shliv that's talking about a deathbed bequest. Devar mehadarhu, because that's something that can be retracted. So it depends. If the guy agrees, yes, you should give it to him, right? But he has the right to, because it was a deathbed bequest, he has the right to change his mind. Because we say Michael Neymar. What's the problem here? What's the possible problem? Dilma Kasava Mekar Lahai, the Imlach Vol Yavan. Maybe he wrote this document, and then he said, you know what, bad idea. I'm not going to give it to this guy. Vahadar Kosvalina Shachrina, and then he writes another document to give it to somebody else. V'avanile, and that he actually stands by. He gives him the document. And then he loses the first document, and it's found. So maybe the concern is that maybe he wants to give it back to the first person, right? He first wanted to give it to A, changed his mind, gave it to B. Now he's changing his mind and wants to give it back to A. So maybe, and that's not justified. So Gemara says not a problem. Even on this bari yavale. So if it was a regular gift, then Yavale that he gave it to him as a regular gift, Leisleip Seda. So the second guy doesn't lose anything by giving it back to the first. Because when both documents show up in court, Basrai Sazachi, the one that's later is the one that takes effect. Like I wrote a document in Nissan, didn't give it to anybody, and then I wrote one in Tishrei, gave it to the most recent one is the one that will take effect, like with a will, right? It's the most recently dated will is the one that takes effect.
Why is it not valid? The case where he gave it to one, gave it to A, changed his mind, gave it to B, and gave it to A. His last one should be valid then, right?
Yes, right. So if it's a regular gift, right, then it actually belongs to the second guy. So go ahead and give the first document, the found document, which is dated earlier. Go ahead and give it back to the guy because it's useless. It won't be upheld if the second guy has a document that's dated later, right? So go ahead and give it back to him. It's fine. The Chinaf when the second one comes, but the last one is the one that's effective. The Hadar Be'mi Kamaisa, because we say, there's a later document, so he must have changed his mind about the first one. Okay, so there's no possibility of expropriating property improperly. Now, even what if it's a deathbed bequest? There's also no problem. The Basrai Sazachi, because the second one is going to win out. The Kahadar Be'emi Kamaisa, because by doing a later will, we're assuming that the first one was retracted, right? That he intended to retract it, which he can do. So whether or not whether it's a sickbed bequest or a regular gift, the second one is going to win out. So go ahead, give back the first document to the first guy. It has no power over the second document. So why does the brisa differ from the Mishnah? Ki katani b'brisa alpha pisha shnei amodim. When does the brisa say that if both of them agree that this is what happened, and the document belongs to the guy, to the receiver of the gift? When do you not return it to anybody? When it's a regular, healthy person's gift. To love bar mahadarhu, because that person, if he gives a gift, he can't. There's no takebacks, right? It's only a shlif meirah that has takebacks, right? But if a regular gift, if I give you a gift, then I can't then go ahead and decide to give it to somebody else. It's already not mine, right? So if there's a dispute over whether this is a valid document or not, or whether it was actually put into effect, don't give it back to either of them, because that would put the power in their hands, and we don't really know what happened. Okay, so since we don't know what happened, we have to say, let's not rely on this document. We don't know who it really belongs to. Because we could say, Dilma Kasava Lahaime Kara, maybe he first, wrote the document to give it to A. Amlich Yavle never gave it to him. Then he wrote a document to give it to B. And he actually gave it to him. So now, if we give the first document back to the first recipient who never actually was the recipient, then he would have incorrect power to take ownership of the gift of a savar. This is how he would think. Mehadar lo matzina hadranabi. I can't, like, I want this thing. This is mine. I can't. The giver would say, legally, I can't take it back. I already gave it to him. I changed my mind, but it's too bad. I can't. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell the Beis Din, Dana laha yehavta, that I gave the document, v'nihadru niale kasava, and they'll give it back to him. Ki heiche dechimapik haksava dekadim zachabehu. And since his document is dated earlier, he will win the case. Okay, so that's just explaining how by returning this document to the to anybody, you'll be subverting what really happened. Right? What really happened was he never gave the first gift, but if you produce this document, this document could be used as proof that he did give the gift, even though it didn't happen. And that's why we don't give it back to anybody. So what we
Why is
do
that different from the other case? Because the owner of the
no, it's not
object, he
different.
could give. No,
It's
there
not
even
different.
a
We're
shliv
just explaining the
doesn't he have
details.
it? Well, even a
Yeah, yeah.
shliv, he could.
I'm sorry. Say again.
I'm saying even a shliv how is this different? A shliv he has the right to take it back and give it to a second person. So here the same thing. You give it back to the giver because we don't know, maybe he changed his mind.
Right. Since we don't know, we have to prove it. Right. So shliv meirah, the power is in it. The second document wins because the giver has the power to revoke the first one and give it to somebody else. Right. But a not shliv meirah, a regular healthy person, once he gives it to somebody, he has no power to revoke it.
Why
Right.
not?
So why
Why not?
not? If I
Yeah.
give you a gift, if it's done, I can't go ahead and give it to somebody else now. It's yours.
And shliv meirah, well, why does he
Shliv
have?
Meirah, you do have the power to revoke it. That's the difference between Shliv Meirah and a Bari, right? Because of the exigent circumstances, we have a different kind of set of rules, right?
Also,
That we assume that when a person on his sick bed makes a bequest, it's conditional, right? It's not really a full gift. He's influenced by the knowledge that he's about to die. Okay, so if it turns out that he's not dead yet, so we don't give the same strength to the bequest, right? We allow him to take it back because he was operating under duress, as it were, under stress anyway. That's how I understand the Shli Meirah, the difference for Shli Meirah. That makes sense?
so that's a given then. That's the rule we established then.
Correct. Correct. That's why there's a difference between, that's why the second document, the later document of the Shliv Meirah has power, right? So even if I first gave it to somebody else or determined that after death it will go to somebody else, right? I can change my mind. And then, so a later document that I wrote is valid. But if I'm healthy and I write you a gift document and I give it to you, that's the end of my involvement, right? If I write a later document, that one has no power. Okay, so in that case, the earlier document is the determinative one, right? So for a healthy person, the earlier document is the one that determines the disposition. For a Shliv Meirah, it's the later dated document that determines the disposition. That's why there's a difference.
Okay, wasn't there opinion here? We don't give it to either one though?
Yeah, right. Yeah, so there are two opinions. Do you give it or not? The Mishnah and the Brisa.
And what's halacha?
Oh, good question. I don't know. I don't think we've gotten there yet. Maybe the Gemara will come to a conclusion. which is correct. Not sure. Hold that thought. So anyway, for wrapping this up, so what the court says, Anan hai kasava lo yavinu leilai. I'm not going to give it to you from the giver. Dilma michtav kasavt mihav lo yavni leilai. Maybe you wrote it but didn't give it to him. So then it really belongs to the second guy. V'yahavta leina shachrina, and you gave it to somebody else, to the second guy, and now you're changing your mind again. So you really gave it to the second guy, but now you're changing your mind. So you're trying to manipulate us with this earlier ineffective document, trying to make us believe that it is effective, but it's not. So that's why we don't give it to you. Iloyav ta leina shachrina. Now, if it's true that you never gave it to anybody else, the kabayis to tasle, and you want it high, and you want to give it to the first person, go ahead and give it to him. Nobody's stopping you. Give it to him. But if you actually did give it to somebody else, that person won't lose anything. Because the first document will be the one that is effective. All right. So if we're protecting a potential recipient, right, by not giving you the original earlier document. Right. The earlier document will give you power over what is possibly somebody else's property. What we're saying is write a document now. You want to give them a gift, give them a gift. But if there was somebody who comes later and claims ownership of it, then and they can prove it, then they'll be right, and they'll be contesting your later document, and they'll win. Okay.
Mosque is this case is the early. This case, this is where he gives it to a bari, right? It's a bari.
Yeah. Right.
And the first person gets generally the first person gets
it. The person with the earlier date gets it, right? Wait a minute. We've been talking about the Mishnah and the Bryce are both talking about not Bari, but sickbed, right? But we're talking about sickbed bequests. So your whole analysis is saying it's talking about a Bari, but that's not what the Mishnah and the Bryce were talking about explicitly. It makes no sense. So what is the answer? We're talking about really a deathbed bequest, volokasha, but it's not. There's no reason to assume that there's a argument between the Mishnah and the Brisa. Habe, who's telling us who is making the admission, right? Who is saying yes, give it to this person, right? To the recipient. If it's you, if you're still alive, and it's you, then you have the right to do that. But if we're talking about the estate, the son says to give it back, that's a different story. The son doesn't, the inheritor doesn't have that right. So masnisin the kamar tnu nosnin. So our Mishnah, which says that if the person says go ahead and this is a valid gift document, go ahead and give it, but so that's that's fine. That's you, because you have the right to revoke it later. The bar mehadar, because you can change your mind, but the Amrina, why? Because even if I decide to give it to somebody else, like I have that right. There's nobody losing anything. The Kamo Basra Zachi, because in that case it's the last person, right? The later date, which wins, because I'm a Shlib Meira. The Hadar Mikama, because I'm allowed, I have the right to revoke the earlier gift. So if I make a later gift, it's the later one that wins. When the Brisa says the Brisa which says don't give it back, then we're talking about where the son, where the person who gave it is already dead. The gift takes effect, is fully effective. The estate can no longer revoke the gift, and so then don't give it back, because then the rule is different. Then it's the earlier date that determines And you would have to prove that to give a document with an earlier date to somebody, you'd have to prove that it's valid, and you can't. Yeah, I mean, because Dilma Casa Lahai, because maybe the father wrote this document, but he changed his mind, right? Ubasar Avuha Casa Ihu and then the son had then gave it to somebody else, Viavale, and gave it to him. And he wants to now he wants to retract it and give it to the first guy illegally. But so by handing over the document, we would enable that that to take place. And Savar, his reasoning would be, I can't revoke the gift legally, right? It's done. So how will I subvert that? I'll say the Abba Yavalelahai would Nasvu Leg Save. I'll say that yes, my father actually gave that gift. They'll give him the document. And now since it's an earlier date, they'll be able to confiscate it from the second guy, the Huzache. V'niflug b'hadei. And then, and maybe I'm colluding with him. Maybe the reason why would somebody want to do that? Because maybe he's saying, listen, we're gonna go get this piece of property back. I'll participate in this sham if you split it with me. So maybe it's just a thing that's designed a strategy that's designed to incorrectly confiscate this property from its real owner. So what do? We say to the estate, to the son, Anan we're not going to give it to you. Or to the second guy, to the other recipient, second recipient. Maybe your father wrote the document, but never gave it. And then you sold it to somebody else or gave it to somebody else. Now you are changing your mind. And you're going to use this fake document, this found document, you're going to use it to revoke it improperly from the guy that you gave it to. Ella, so what's your option? If you're telling the truth, Zilat Hasha. Go give him the gift, right? No problem. Even though your father didn't give it to him, and you're giving it to him, then there's no problem, no loss. Because in this case, the earlier date will win out. Okay, so we're not going to give you this found document with an earlier date because we don't know if it's true. But go ahead and give it to somebody else. If another person comes along with an earlier document, then we're going to give it to the person with the earlier document.
Well, we were saying before that in the case of Shkiva that the later person receives the document. That's the rule. So this would imply
right.
that the earlier person could get it.
That's right, because now we're dealing with the son. The son doesn't have the same privilege as the Shliv Meirah, right? To revoke the gift. No such thing, right? Only the Shliv Meirah has that. Only the person himself has that right. But the once he's dead, it's done, right? The estate doesn't have the power to revoke this gift. Yeah?
So the son could then give it to what he thinks the father wants to the earlier person, and then
the son can do whatever he wants.
He could be in but as you mentioned, there could be a scheme here where the son wants to benefit and share the money or whatever he wants to do. So how do we know then what the son is, if he's really acting in the father's
and we go by documents that people have in their possession. Our question is, you have this found document and you don't know who it belongs to. Did it never get given and it still belongs to the giver, or did it actually get given and it belongs to the recipient? You don't know. So that's why you don't mix in by granting it to one party or the other, because it's a determinative document, right? This document, if it were accepted as valid evidence, would be dispositive. So since we don't know, it's a found document, we don't know for sure, who it really belongs to, who really had it before it was lost. So we don't mix in by deciding who to give it to, because there's potential for doing it wrong, and for that having consequences.
Aren't we saying here that we do give it back to the son? and let him decide?
No, that's the difference between the Mishnah and the Brisa, right? One says give it back. That's in the case of it's the Shlimer himself, and the other says if it's the son, don't give it back because the son doesn't have that right, and so it's the earlier date will if there's no Shliv Meirah issue, right? If there's no take back by the Shliv Meirah, then which document is dispositive? The earlier one. Whatever action I took first and took effect, that's what took effect. I don't have the right to do a second document, right? So we don't give it back because we don't know if this is a valid document with the earlier date. So if we give it to somebody, we give them the power of owning the item because the earlier date is dispositive.
So who gets the document? No one stays in Beis Din. They have
No
to
one.
work.
Yeah. Unless someone can prove that it belongs to them, I guess they hold it in escrow or something, pending any resolution. But assuming there's no resolution, it never gets given to anybody.
Not even the first person.
No.
He has to prove it.
Mhm. Okay, let's pick it up here tomorrow. Have a good day.